Thank you for joining us today for Think Big with Michael Zellner, powered by Sleepy Z's Masonry. My guest today for episode 148 is Richard Bakewell. Richard is an award-winning director and director of photography who has spent the last 20 years doing narrative films, commercials, music videos, branded content, corporate, and documentaries. He attended Columbia College Chicago with a concentration in cinematography. Today, we're going to talk about the company he founded in the early 2000s, Lightforce Pictures, who has done jobs for major companies like Doritos, Netflix, Yahoo, Target, and many more. We're also going to talk about his career in the film industry and his latest film, which is receiving a lot of attention and acclaim, Roswell Delirium. And it stars several big names of 80 stars. And we'll talk more about those today, too. So welcome to the show, Richard.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Before we get started talking today, I would like to thank our two sponsors for Think Big with Michael Zellner, Roof and Nail and Buckley's Grill. Roof and Nail is one of the leading experts in insurance restorations. Co-owner Kelly Potter and his crews are preferred vendors of many mainstream insurance companies focused in the tri-state area of Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Not only can Roof and Nail provide you with the best evaluation, but they also can provide you with a competitive bid for any pocket roofing projects. And it doesn't matter if the job is big or small, they do them all. And Buckley's Grill here in Memphis is a hidden gem for those seeking a fantastic dining experience. Locally owned by Jeff Fiorinelli and Ken Dick, they have been around and specialized in steaks and Southern hospitality for over 30 years. This upscale restaurant boasts a contemporary atmosphere with a touch of classic elegance. And from the moment you step inside, you're greeted with friendly faces, warm hospitality that makes you feel right at home. So once again, thank you to Buckley's Grill and Roof and Nail. You know, Richard, I know you've been in Los Angeles for right about, 20 years now. Tell us just a little bit about your early life and, where you grew up, please.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and then I was kind of like the weird kid who wanted to make movies, and it was a natural progression to then, like, once I got to high school, to figure out how to get to that point, to like the training, and where you could go, like a film school. And then I found Columbia College Chicago, and after my senior year, moved out to Illinois, and then just went for it full force. And I did the first year and a half at Columbia College Chicago until like I ran out of money, because like it's very expensive. I mean, I went to school and it was like 3,000 a semester back then. And I think now it's 34,000 a semester. So I don't think kids can even afford to go anymore. It's like it's just out of control. And that's not even like your cost of living. That's not a dorm. That's not even your books or your film labs. And that's just like the base package. So I wrote some bad checks to stay in school until they said, guess what? You can't stay anymore. You've already done this like 6 times. So I had to get real jobs. And I worked for like a law firm for a while. And then somehow I landed at a brokerage firm as a temp job. And then they liked me so much, they decided to keep me. And then I got like Series 7 licensed and started trading stocks for like 2.5 years. And then like 9/11 happened, and we lost some people that we knew, obviously in New York, and they offered like severance packages, and I didn't take it at first, but then they said, look, we had to let people go, so you're going to be one of them because you're one of the newest hires. So I took like the 4-month package, and then I decided to go back to film school because I could afford it now and finish up. And then that led me to an internship that I did in Chicago for a daytime soap opera, and then they moved to LA. And they said, do you want to come out there and work on the second season? I said, sure, but it was going to be temporary. And then, after 4 months, the show got picked up again for more episodes. And I'm like, wow, now we're going to be here for 8 months. And I'm keeping my apartment in Chicago. And I'm like, that's expensive. I'm like right downtown. And it started to like really come up in the neighborhood. It got really big. There's, a Starbucks there, and everything started just getting really expensive. And then I had an apartment on Hollywood in Fuller by the Runyon Canyon. So I mean, I was paying 2 rents just to like work on this job. And then I'm like, okay, I have to make a decision. I can't do both. So I decided to go back to Chicago after the show was over and pack up to come out here for good. And I've been here 20 years finally. So yeah.
That's amazing. My dad went to podiatry school in Chicago, and he would just tell me stories about, obviously you see it on TV. He goes, "Do you think it's cold in Memphis when it gets cold?" He goes, "A winter in Chicago or even a fall in Chicago. It's crazy."
Oh yeah, I mean, I was, when I was younger, I was kind of crazy, so I would walk around downtown in the winter without even a hat. I'd wear gloves, but and a scarf, but I wouldn't even wear a hat because I was like, well, I'm just gonna toughen myself up and deal with this cold. But like, it gets so bad that it feels like somebody is just constantly slapping you in the face when that wind blows off, the lake. It's really intense. And I go back every now and then, but I try to avoid January as much as I possibly can. I'd rather go like in the summer to visit again, but it's that cold is just, I mean, there's nothing like it in the world.
Yeah, I would not do good with that. So yeah, I don't blame you at all. You said, and this goes into a little bit about what you just talked about, quote, "I got into this business because it's what I wanted to do. I went to film school at Columbia College Chicago, had to stop halfway through because I ran out of money," unquote. Obviously, you didn't let a quote unquote little thing like money stop you from pursuing your dream. I know you talked about several jobs. You end up, got a severance package, finished school. How much of a role did your determination and perseverance play in you reaching your goal to get into the film industry?
Well, I mean, it was a huge factor. And, I always tell people, like, out of my class, there's only one other person that I know it's still in the business. Like, they're a gaffer for a lot of like movies and shorts and commercials in Chicago. But it was all determination. Like, the term quit never really applied to me in my entire life. I just never wanted to be like a quitter and give up. Like the idea of having to go back home and say, guess what? I couldn't do it. It was never an option. I mean, there were times when I was in Chicago, when I was trying to like finish school and figure out what I was going to do, that I was like out of money and I had to like sell my DVD player and stuff just to pay rent until I could like figure out a job that I could, do in the business. 'Cause I'm like, well, I'm out of college now. I need money. And it wasn't happening fast enough. So I was selling things that I owned just to stay there. And, it's like when I decided to come to LA, it's like I gave up all of my friendships. It's like you built a life. I was there in Chicago for over a decade, and it's like you build a life there, and then it's like you have to let it go. And your friends kind of go, like, they're still around, you talk to them on the phone, but it's not the same,
Right.
and it takes a lot inside to say, hey, I'm gonna give it a shot. You don't know what the outcome's gonna be, but like it's just a gamble. And it's like I decided to roll the dice. And I don't regret it at all, but it is like there's something about certain people either that have that factor or not. And I guess I was born with it. I didn't know it until the time came to choose. And then I decided, okay, I'm just gonna go for it 100%.
How did you do selling stocks? You talked about that. Did you enjoy that?
It's kind of funny. I didn't enjoy it at all. Like I think I enjoyed doing like, trading stocks for people. They call in and then we put in orders, or we do like, asset allocation and stuff. And, I worked at a pretty big brokerage firm, Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty big. And we had like all of the very high elite clientele in our division. So we had, the funny thing is one of our clients was Erwin Winkler, who, produced Rocky. And I was always like, oh my God, this is the producer of Rocky. I was so like enamored by that, and I always wanted to talk to him, but that never happened. It was always the
Right.
secretary. Um, but I didn't hate it completely, but a lot of the people there made the job just not fun. And like there were days I just didn't want to go to work because I didn't like a lot of the people and that mentality, that corporate dominance. Like you had to go to the corporate parties on the weekends, you had to go to all the events, otherwise you weren't like one of the cool people, like the select. And it was very much high school clicky. And I'm like, this is not for me. This is kind of like a stepping stone until I can get to where I need to be. And the money was great. I mean, we got like bonuses from our bosses and then from the company every year. And that was like the first time I ever really had money, so to speak, because I came from a very humble upbringing, didn't really have a whole lot. So for me, it's like the first time I could actually just walk around downtown Chicago and buy whatever I wanted. It was like, wow, this is insane, and it gave me that lifestyle. But I did not enjoy the day to day, going there back and forth. And some days, it was like I'd just walk home in silence, and other days I'd walk home with my Walkman, and listen to music. But like most days, I just felt like it was beating my energy down. I didn't like care about anything because of the work that I was doing. It's all about money, and I'm like, that's not inspiring to me.
I had some friends of mine that were commodity brokers that tried to get me into that business years ago, about 20 years ago. And I was like, I just remember from the movie Trading Places when they were explaining to Eddie Murphy about what it was. And he says, sounds like you guys a couple of bookies. And that's true because the
Yeah.
commodity brokers, they actually, friends of mine told me, we keep putting people's money, if they make money, we keep putting it back in and back in and
Yep.
back in. And eventually everybody loses.
Oh
And
yeah. I
they
mean,
knew it. I saw I couldn't mentally, and I'm not made that way. I couldn't do that to people.
no, and with us, like in our division, because they were like the higher elite people with millions of dollars invested, I think it was like 5 million minimum. We would take their money and then, once they sold something, we put it somewhere else for them, but it was always under our control. And I remember one time, I think when I first started, I had to also do wire transfers for a lot of our clients. And I remember I sent out a $36 million wire transfer for Eli Lilly and Company. And I was like, wow. And it was just like to press that button and see that money go boop and it's
Yeah.
gone. I'm like, woof, that was just insane to have that much power in just one little fingertip.
Yeah. I take it y'all probably, obviously, if I remember correctly, lost a lot of people in 9/11.
Oh yeah, I lost like six friends, on 9/11 who were working down there. When it's crazy because I remember I got to work and then as soon as I got my coffee to go sit down at the desk, the second, plane hit the, tower two. And I was like, I don't even know what was going on. We were all shocked, and we had a squawk box that connects to the stock exchange floor, and you could just hear everybody yelling and screaming or running for
Oh
their
my
lives.
God.
They were all in terror. And I think we were the first company to evacuate that day because we were on the 49th floor of the Sears Tower. And then, I didn't find out for weeks who had lived or who didn't. I didn't know until later. So I assumed that everybody was still alive and couldn't communicate because, lines were down out there. So you just had no way of getting a hold of everybody. And then, like, for weeks after 9/11, we had bomb threats every week and we would do evacuation drills. I mean, we thought we were doing evacuation drills, and sometimes they just yelled on our floor to get out, and we all would start running to get out of the building because we didn't know if that was real or not. I mean, we were all like suffering really bad, and as soon as they started sending planes to fly in the sky again, like people started having anxiety and like getting sick, and it just had to like they just like would go home. They couldn't take it, for a while. It was pretty traumatic.
I never even thought about that, that places like Chicago and where big buildings like the Sears Tower would have that kind of, bomb threats afterwards. Obviously it gives crazy people even more ideas of crazy things to do.
Exactly. Yeah. We had them, I think, every week for a while until like I think I left my last day was actually Halloween. So I think we had them every week until then. And sometimes they seemed legit, and then sometimes you found out it was a worker who worked in the building who wanted to leave early, and then he called in a bomb threat, and it's like, really, after all we've been through, and you're going to do this? And it was just terrifying. It's like you didn't know every day that was going to be it, And there was one time I remember when we had our first bomb scare, like we tried to all get in the elevator, and they were so packed you couldn't get in the elevator. So like me and another coworker ran down 49 flights of stairs, and I'm like waiting for the white flash to happen for everything to end. And I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. And I'm in dress shoes, my ankles are like just popping, they're hurting from running down the stairs. And then we get out to the bottom floor and he falls on his face. And I
Oh,
have to go back and help him up. This is somebody that I hated too. I didn't even like this person, but I was like, I'm going to help him up anyways. And we get out. And then we find out it's just a bomb scare. And I'm like, wow, after all that, like your emotions are so high. And it was like I remember I walked to the sky deck where people go for the tourists to watch, go up there and see the view. And I just like I had a major breakdown. I'm like, I thought that was over for me. I thought my life was over. It was like so traumatic.
yeah. I remember first seeing the plane. Everybody used to look up in the air for a long time at planes just because it was, instinctive, I guess. But,
Yeah.
after a while, it's just like everything, we forget so easily sometimes.
Yeah, and it's easier to forget, but like, like sometimes like, I make jokes about 9/11 because that's how I deal with it, so I lost people. but it's like it's like, it's something that never goes away. I think the loss of anybody, or something like that. I think that's like the last time in this country where we really bonded together and we were there for each
Absolutely.
other. Like I remember, like, Chicago cops are so tough. They're very like, don't mess with me, don't look at me. They're very hardcore. And you'd have cops helping people across the street. People be bringing cops food and water when they're out there doing traffic, for at least 4 months, and then it all just kind of stopped, but like for a while, we kind of united together and came together to help each other. And then I don't think I've seen that since in over
I
20
agree.
years.
I agree 100%. What soap opera were you on?
It was this daytime soap opera called Starting Over. It was like about six women in the house who all had like problems they were trying to deal with, and had life coaches and stuff. And it was on NBC, if I remember correctly. So.
That's cool. I bet, I sort of say that's fate that you ended up going having to go to LA, that took you out there at first. And then, it helped probably in making your decision to, pack back, go back to Chicago, pack up and eventually move back out there.
Oh yeah, because the funny part was I had just gotten offered a job for 30 days in Chicago, back like continuous. And in Chicago at that time, there was no tax incentives, there was no reason for productions to come film. They were trying to like get more money out of, film companies and commercial companies. So like nobody was coming there to film anymore. But like to get 30 days of work consistently, I was like, oh my God, it's a lot of money and I'm gonna work and not have to worry about rent for a while. And then they were like, hey, do you want to come to LA for 4 months? And I'm like, oh boy. So I had to make a decision, like, and I had 4 days to get to LA after the phone call. So I was like, I had to really just figure it out fastly. Like there was no time to really fully consider what I was going to do. But I chose LA over the 30 days of work in Chicago because I'm like, well, let's just give it a shot, see what happens and then go from there.
People don't realize about those tax incentives, how important they are. I remember back in the 90s, we had several movies, John Grisham movies that were filmed here, The Firm, The Client.
Yep.
I think The People versus Larry Flint was here. There were several movies, and then the incentives went away. And then I have a good friend of mine who's, decently working actor. And he
Sure.
says, everything is Atlanta, New Orleans, now New Mexico, and places like that. And it's because of the incentives they give.
Yeah, and people, the sad part is people uproot their lives to go to these places thinking that, okay, this is going to be the new spot where they're going to make all these movies. And they, for like a couple years, it is the hot spot and they make a lot of films there. They build studios. I remember when Breaking Bad finished, everybody had moved there to like go work in New Mexico. And then they decided to not really film there anymore for other stuff. It became Atlanta and now it's becoming Oklahoma. So it's like,
I
they're
didn't
like,
know
how long?
Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's like, how long can we keep doing these tax incentives? And then they just stop. And like, it's like once you install that, you should have to like follow through forever. It's like, because people are like, like leaving California, they're leaving New York, they're coming in from everywhere to move there because they want to make money. It's like, they want the opportunities. So they, and I just feel like if you're going to start doing tax incentives, it should be like at least like a 10-year contract where you do that for
That's a
10
good
years,
idea.
not it's like 2, 3 years. Say, oh, we're going to pull the plug now. Sorry, it's over.
Yeah, that's right. So you're in LA. You founded your company, Lightforce Pictures. What was your vision for the company when you got started 20 years ago, and how has it changed over the years?
Well, it really changed for me because in the beginning, like I was doing mostly like reality shows because those paid consistently. It was nonstop work. I mean, you'd work like 20 days a month, plus. Like I remember one summer I worked 27 days in the month. It was like this nonstop, a lot of money, not great work, but you're still working and you're creating, so and you're learning a little bit. So at first it was all reality based, and then over, the first 5 years, I was pretty much getting hired for me and maybe a camera package, so it's very small hiring, and that can sometimes bring someone else into the equation for work, like they didn't already have somebody hired, like a sound mixer, I could bring that person in for a job. And then, after like 5, 10 years, I really started to kind of like change the course of what I was doing. So I started working more in narrative and commercials, music videos, documentaries, and like branded content. And it really allowed me to really like step up the equipment that we had, buy a bunch of cameras, and then like hire almost every single person on the crew. And then I could bring them all in with me. It's like when they hired me, I'm like, well, I have an operator, I have a sound mixer, I have a camera assistant, I have PAs, I have a makeup artist, and then I could just bring in my own core people. And that's really the change from where I started. It was just me in the beginning, and then it became everybody else. So then I, kind of just became the person running everything, and then I would just hire everyone, and then everyone, just got work because of me after a while. So that was a good part. Was like I got to actually repay favors. People would help me out on stuff, and like, oh, now I can get you some work for a while and help you out and get you some money in the bank.
I had a really lifelong friend of mine that worked with John Peters for a long time, and he went. I guess this was after 2008 crash. After a few years and everything,
Hmm.
he went from making in LA 300,000 a year down to 100 grand a year, and that's a big difference
Oh
in out
yes.
there. 100 grand a year here in Memphis, you're good. 100
Oh
grand
yeah.
a year in LA, completely different and everything. And he said 2008, 2009 affected a lot. And then I believe there was, other parts of the industry that, affected it too for some people.
Yeah, I mean, that time definitely impacted us, 'cause there's also, I think, the writer's strike around then too.
Yeah.
So the work kind of dried up, much like it did last year. It's like we had the writers and then the SAG strike last year. And, I think they finally agreed like back in October of last year, November. And really, it hasn't even turned around yet. Like it's still the same. Like the strike's over, but the work has not picked up. It's like it's very much the same as it was 6 months ago, sadly. So I don't know what's going to change, but I know like streamers and all the companies and studios are like doing like about 35% less than what they were doing a year ago as far as
Wow.
content, wise. So I don't know if that's going to change, but right now it's like there's just like people that I know, they contact me all the time looking for work. And I'm like, well, I don't have that much to give right now because the workload is down currently.
Well, hopefully that picks back up. I mean, I watch a
Yeah.
lot of Netflix and Amazon Prime when I'm riding my exercise bike. Is I'll get on some of the series will be several seasons. Some of them will just be like short 6 to 8 episodes
Yep.
and everything, and it's great. But you're right, I haven't seen as much new content come out. You're right.
Yeah, no, and it's like I think, like these streamers have learned, okay, well, we didn't have to make much content in 2020, we kind of learned from that model, and now we didn't make that much last year either, so we can still like keep raising the prices and get more from all these sponsor ads, and we don't have to produce as much stuff because we'll still get people to forget that they're paying that $20 every month for their subscription, and that's what they kind of want. But
Yeah.
eventually people are gonna get really fed up with not having anything to watch on there because they'll put shows on there and movies, and then after like a month or two, they just take them off. And it's like, where'd that show go? I wanted to see,
Yeah.
So people are really starting to kind of get irritated with the way they're just kind of like charging more money for less content than before. It's like it really get out of control.
Yeah, you're right. Because I think about it, most of the stuff that I watch are older stuff, like
Hmm.
2018, sometimes before, sometimes 2021. But the majority of it is not 22, 23. It's older stuff.
No,
I didn't think
I mean,
about that.
I've been so bored for content that I finally watched Band of Brothers, and I've never seen it before. And I'm like, wow, this is a great show. I always heard about it, but I'm like, well, I'll give it a shot now because it's on Netflix. And then I'm like, but really, there's nothing new on there to watch because everything new is just either not very good or there's just very limited amount of stuff.
Yeah. I tell you, a really good series that I watched, Bosch. I don't know if you
Yep.
heard. Yeah, that was a really good. And then they had Bosch I think another second part to it that just started. So I'm hoping it continues because it's actually really, really good. I think Titus Welliver is the star of that show, but it's really good.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You've been doing this now for, I guess, about half your life, close to it. What is the most challenging aspect of bringing a script to life on screen, whether it's a short or feature film? And how do you overcome a challenge like that?
Well, the biggest challenge is the money side of it. That is like the hardest factor about making any film. It's easy to get your friends together and make, a short film without any money to it or any actors that are known. That's You can do that for a couple $100. I remember I helped a friend of mine do a music video like 7 or 8 years ago, and we shot like at this place on Sunset, And I think we did it for under $1,000 because most of the money was just like paying the location and food. Everybody else worked for free. I worked for free to help them out. And you can do that kind of stuff, but when you have a movie where you have all these things and to worry about, like you have child actors, you got to pay a studio teacher every day that they're on set. You have locations because you're in California, then they know they can get a lot of money out of you. And then you have all these actors who are in SAG in your script, and that's money that you got to think about, and paying into SAG, and all these things kind of like really, it's really about money, and it's like hard to get investors to come on board, especially when you are not a known director. Like that's a challenge that I had, was getting the money that I wanted to get from investors has never happened. So I had to put some of my own money into it and then make the movie. And that is the hardest thing about doing film and TV, is like, unless you have a track record and a studio behind you, no one's ever going to give you a dime. That's the hardest challenge today. But I tell everybody who wants to do it, it's like, well, you have to keep making projects, keep doing shorts, maybe don't make a feature for a while, but just keep doing short films until you get something that sticks and people see, and then it maybe becomes an Oscar nominated short, and then you can possibly get some really big investors off of that. But the challenge is always the money. And then, who can you get for what kind of money you have? It's like, you're not going to get, a Tom Cruise, you're not going to get, Naomi Watts or anybody, but there are people who will take a gamble on you, and they will definitely come on board if they believe in what you're doing and in the script.
That's awesome. You said, quote, every film I make is inspired by what the greats have done before. My films tell the hero's journey about a flawed character, giving hints of humor along the way to make you fall in love with the protagonist, and in the end come grief for them, as they, like us, sometimes never had a voice, never felt they deserved love or stood a chance in this world, unquote. I love that. Wow.
Thank you.
What led you to go into this direction with your work?
Well, it's funny because it's right there behind you on the wall. Rocky was probably one of the biggest inspirations to me. I remember when I was 20, I always wanted to be a boxer. It was always in my blood because of that movie and that series. Like that was what inspired me. And I remember there was this Italian girl that I was really like infatuated with, and I lied to her and said I was a boxer, and I wasn't. And I told her I could, if you want to come see me fight, and she was, oh yeah, I'd love to come see you fight. So I lied and said, oh, I have one coming up. And I had to go to like 4 different gyms over the course of a day. And I took the train all over Chicago to find all these boxing gyms. And I found one that would allow me to come there and train and maybe have a fight in 3 to 6 months. And so I started training there. And, like, I think for me, like, sure, I had to like kind of pretend my way through it and do this, but it was all because of people like Stallone, who kind of paved the way for me. Like he said, I want to make this movie, I have a script, but I'm going to act in it. And
Yeah.
that was, I mean, nobody did that, nobody stood up for that. I mean, he had to sell his dog to even pay rent, and he eventually bought his dog back. But like that inspiration really just like propelled me through my career. Like that whole like idea, like he says in Rocky Balboa, it's like no matter how brutal and life is, it ain't sunshine and rainbows. You just don't give up. Life will hit you hard, but you have to take it and keep moving forward. That's what winners do.
Yep.
And that's what I've done through my career, because, in this business, unlike anything else, there are so many highs, so many lows. Like it's like you're a surfer, like out there on the calm water, and all of a sudden you're on these big waves and life is great, and then all of a sudden you just get wiped out by a big wave, and there you don't work for a month. So you have to ride the wave of just not giving up. And that's the hardest part, because people I know, they go through like a lot of depression because they're not working, and actor friends, production friends, and it's hard. Like this is not made for everybody, because it's like there's so many people who want to do the job, because it's cool, you're not at an office, you're not punching a clock, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication. And then like without Stallone, I don't think I would ever have done this journey, because it's like that whole franchise was inspirational for what he did and what his career became because of one little thing he wrote.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you obviously know the story and the background of it. And a lot of people don't know that they actually ran out of money right before the fight scene in the first Rocky. And he goes,
Yeah.
I think it was over to Erwin Winkler's house or Robert Chartoff, and was honking the horn at midnight. He tells the story on Johnny Carson that he goes, we have to do the fight scene. And that
Yeah.
fight scene, they made a mistake. They did his shorts the wrong color, and so they
Yep.
wrote that into the script because they didn't have the money to do the poster over again. The ring was paper, like crepe paper around the rope in the ring, the red. They couldn't afford to make it that color that way. And I mean, they had to have the fight scene, or the movie obviously would have never done what it did. I
Never.
mean, and especially, I always tell people I take clips from that movie and always show them on my Facebook or Instagram as, motivational clips. And I say, that scene in round 14 when he gets knocked down and Mickey's like, stay down, stay down.
Yep.
And he was, grabbing at the ropes, and he gets up and he goes, come on. And the look on Apollo Creed's face, and it just, that there was the epitome of the whole movie right there. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go the distance. I'm not gonna win, because he said that to Adrian right before. All I want to do is go the distance with Creed, because
Yep.
no one's ever gone the distance. And so, yeah, you're like me. I'm probably about 10 years older than you, but yeah, those movies there inspired the heck out of me, and I've used their clips and all that stuff throughout my life. So that's funny how it played in both of our lives that way, roles.
Yeah, yeah, it really did. And I remember that scene where he's talking about like, look, I don't want to, I know I'm not going to win. All I want to do is go the distance because I don't know if the first time I'm not a bum, in
Yep.
my life.
Yep.
And this, I heard a story of him telling like they wanted to cut that scene because they didn't have any time or money to shoot that night. And he goes, well, I'll do it in one take. And they're like, we don't have time for that. He goes, I'll do it in one take. It's got to be in the movie. It's got to be in the movie. And he convinced him to let him do one take. That's the only take they have of the whole scene.
I didn't know that. Wow,
Yeah,
I
I
just
was like,
learned something
wow.
new. And I thought I knew
Yeah.
everything about the series. The only one he missed on, and he admitted it, was Rocky Five, the one with Tommy Morrison. He goes, I
Yeah.
missed on that one. Then they pretended that didn't even happen, like when he did Rocky Balboa in '06. They sort of pretended that whole movie didn't even happen, and they went from four to that movie. And it was smart, because I thought Rocky Balboa in 2006 was great. Yeah.
I I did too, and I remember when that came out, like I was dating this girl, and I said, "Look, we're gonna watch Rocky 1 to 4, and then we're gonna skip 5, and then go see Rocky 6 at the end of the night." And she goes, "Why can't we watch 5?" I said, "Because it's terrible.
Oh,
Like you
that's right.
don't want to watch it. It's not very good. We're just gonna skip it and pretend like it never happened." And then we watched 1 to 4, went to go see 6 in the theater, and people were cheering. Like it was like the old days. It felt like Rocky 3 and 4 again. Like people were cheering when he was fighting and potentially winning. Like it was like, wow, it was good to see that feeling again and come out in the audience. Because they don't cheer anymore. Like you can barely get people to laugh in the theater because they're scared to laugh out loud. So it really is just exciting to see people have fun again in the theater and get like involved.
Yeah, because he fought a real fighter, Antonio Tarver, who was,
Yeah.
a great fighter, in his time.
Yep.
So that was the good times. Anytime that movie comes on, I watch it. And I think the Creed series are good. The third one went a little bit dark, but the first two were, really, really good, especially with Stallone involved in them.
Yeah, I tried it. I didn't go see Creed 3 because I was like, well, you don't have Stallone and he didn't kill him off, but I know there's all this money and contract stuff. And he wants part of the name back, and so they just kind of cut him out of the script. And I'm like, well, I just it's not Creed or Rocky without Stallone. It's got to be him in it. Otherwise, I'm not going to see it.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. Is there, outside of, the Rocky movies and stuff like that, is there a specific film or director that's had, a pretty big impact and influence on your style?
Yeah, I would say, for me, obviously like I always call him, the creator, George Lucas. I mean, what he did, I mean, look, I mean, Star Wars was brilliant. It is not the best movie ever made, but like at the time it was incredible. And, the actors talk about how he always has said, be faster, more intense, be faster, more intense. But and he wasn't always sure what he wanted in his vision because I think he was overwhelmed with everything. But what he put together was this a franchise that has never died and never will die.
Right.
And like for me to see that as a kid, my dad took me when I was like 5 or 6, and it like changed my life. I was like, oh my God, I started buying every toy that we could afford, and every week go to, Kmart, Children's Palace, Toys R Us, and get whatever they had, and back then, like they had walls of figures. I mean, it was like you'd get like probably like 500 figures on the wall, and you could just choose from. Nowadays, you can't even find Star Wars figures anymore. But that movie and that franchise really started it. And then, Spielberg was another one, with E.T. Like, I remember seeing that movie, and I was pretty traumatized, as a kid, because, you fall in love with this alien, and it's really about friendship, and boy and this alien, they kind of bond and become so strong in a short time. And then the alien leaves, and it was heartbreaking. Even as a kid to watch, I was like, oh my God, I cried after it was over. But just what he did, from an aesthetic of like, it's a story of friendship. This kid hasn't have a father, doesn't have anybody, and he brings his alien, and the kid feels complete again, and that's like, Dee Wallace is the center point of that movie as the mom. And it's just, I mean, he like Spielberg's brilliant. I mean, not every film is a hit, but like, it's hard, I think, to make a great movie because of all the pressure of studios and what they put on
Sure.
you. And oh, you got to get done faster, you got to come under budget, you got to save time, you can't spend all that money. And it's a wonder any movie ever gets made and is great. But he did some things that really was like the focal point of my career. Like, I want to be like that. I want to do movies like that. I want to like have the camera move the way that he makes it move. And I remember one shot, Empire Strikes Back. It's a very simple shot. It's like when, Han Solo goes to look for Luke Skywalker, on the Tauntaun, and, they got to close the doors because it's getting so cold. They got to block out for the night, and the camera just kind of pushes in on Chewbacca and Princess Leia. And then that big sound door crashes, and it shuts. And it just makes you feel like, oh man, he might not make it back, and it's like this, that kind of simple uh, camera aesthetic really helps tell a moment without an actor saying anything. It's all in their face. And that's what I learned with my filmmaking is like, let the actor not do much, but let them do the acting with nonverbal commands, let it all be in the face. And that was something I really just studied growing up in film school and even after.
Were you alive when the first Star Wars came out in 77?
I was alive, but I was too young to see it. So they re-released it a couple times when I saw it on a re-release.
Okay, so we're not, yeah, we're closer in age than I thought. I thought you were, yeah, but yeah, I was a little kid when that first came out too. And I remember that movie. And then, yeah, I have a memory that like big movies, I just, with numbers and dates, I can just remember the years they came out, especially movies like Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Jaws and things like
Yep.
that. But yeah, Star Wars was one of the first movies I really can remember vividly, the exciting, the action and all that stuff. And obviously, look at the star that Harrison Ford became because of that, mainly
Yeah.
obviously because of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, he really did. I mean, that movie launched so many careers, and like, I don't think there'll ever be anything like that again in our history of, movies. I mean, it was like, what, 77 it came out, or
Yeah.
76, and it's like it's still going today, I mean, sure, the quality is not as good, it's like no matter what, no matter what the story is, you cannot you cannot replicate that screen presence of like Harrison Ford and that charisma. Like, people just don't have that these days. Like, so there's great actors out there make you feel a certain way or cry, but like, he was so charismatic, even as Indiana Jones. I'm like, I don't know any actors these days who can make you feel a certain way from just like a smile or something he says. And like, and he was so great as Han Solo, even though he didn't really care for the character. I know that, but like, I mean, he just like really embodied Han Solo to a T. That's like one of my favorite characters of all time on cinema.
Yeah, he's awesome. How do you balance staying true to your artistic vision while also meeting expectations of, producers and the audiences?
Oh, it's funny because it is a balance, like whenever you're doing a production, you're dealing with time restraints, you're dealing with location restraints, you're dealing with money restraints, and you're also, dealing with a lot of factors. And it's like, I remember we were doing this scene towards the end of filming, and it's basically these two girls get off the bus, Mean Girls, Caden and Georgia. They play the Mean Girls in the movie. And I ordered a 1980s bus, and all of a sudden they deliver a 2020 bus with the
Ugh.
flat nose. It looks like a CTA bus. I'm like, this is not going to work. So everyone's getting in hair, makeup, and wardrobe. And me and Larissa, the producer, we're calling and trying to get a bus delivered and get rid of that one. And I'm like, that's never going to work, you know. And just like you have, I think as like a filmmaker, you have this obligation to keep moving forward, to tell the story and stay true to what you want to, what you want to say and what you want to do. And we got a bus there, and then we had it decorated by our production team with Molly and her people, and they put Roswell on the side of the bus. So it stays true to the story. And the hard part is, like, I remember there's like one shot I wanted, and we were fighting the sun because the sun was going down. It was cloud coverage all day, so it was even darker than usual, and I wanted this shot of Kaden where she yells at her friend to, like, "Let's go, we're walking." It's like a very mean girl comment. And I was like, man, we only had about 15 minutes of sunlight. We still have to get the other girl, Kylie's coverage. And I was like, I have to have it because the audience is going to want to see her be mean one last time. I just know it when I watch the edit. They're going to want to see her be mean again. And so you have to really just really think about, okay, what can I get away with? How can I make this work and under these restraints? And that's all you do is like problem solve constantly. And it's like, for me, I want to like tell this beautiful story of the 80s, but also I want to stay true to the time and the era. And it's hard. I mean, it's so hard to do that. And it is a balance. And then you have people who are trying to pressure you because you got to be out of there at a certain time, and they're trying to let you know that the day is coming to an end. So there's all these things you're juggling. And it's like when I'm on set directing, it's like I got the one side of me is like, get the shot, get the shot. Then there's the other side I'm hearing, we gotta go, we gotta wrap it up, but it's just like finding a way to make it all happen so that you do like make everyone feel like they got their money's worth. And it is a hard balance.
Yeah, the average person has no idea all the stresses and pressures you go through to get to the
Oh
finished
no.
product.
Oh no, they don't. And it's funny because once we finished filming Roswell, like the last day we filmed at a jail, and we, like, the sheriffs were kicking us out of there. Like, you have to be out of there at 2 o'clock in the morning on the dot. I mean, we got out of there 1 minute till. And I remember I was having dinner one day with some of the parents and their kids, and we were talking about the movie, and I was telling them some of the issues that we had on the movie, and they're like, "Wow, we had no idea that happened." And I'm like, "And you shouldn't. You should
Right.
never know there's a problem." And I'm like, "We will never tell you there's a problem." It's fun to have those conversations after because your kid's there to do a job and to act and have a good time. And the minute that you start seeing the director stressed out, it just kind of starts to dolly chain and affect everybody else on set. Like, I don't tell anybody anything. I just keep a straight face. I make it work. I keep going and figure out a plan. But like, no one should ever know the struggles of making a movie till after, when it's done. Because then it's fun to laugh at. It's not fun to laugh at when it's happening. It's like, oh my God, this is a big mistake, and how are we gonna fix this? But that's what you got to do. You got to problem solve every day.
You said, quote, "My teacher once said, be ready, know your craft, because one day you'll get called upon to replace someone on set. And if your skills aren't there, you'll be sent packing." He was right, because I got called upon a few times to step up and shoot when the show I was on didn't have a camera operator. He taught me to always be ready and believe in your ability. And because of his words of wisdom, I go on set without any worry whatsoever, unquote. Those were some very powerful words that he told you, because obviously you listen and absorb those words like a sponge, and they've paid off for you, I'm sure, many times.
Oh yeah, no, and I have trained a lot of camera people along the way, camera assistants along the way in my career. One of my first camera assistants was Patrick Dupree, and I was very hard on him. I really instilled all the values and the lessons that I learned from college and my teachers. Like that one teacher, he told me that stuff. And then I had another teacher who, I remember one time I came to class 2 minutes late, and he's like, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm here for class." He goes, "Well, you're late." I'm like, "I know, I'm sorry." He goes, "Well, you don't get credit for today, so you can go home if you want to." And I said, "No, I'll stay here." I said, "I'll stay and I'll take the absence, but I'm still going to stay and be a part of class, you know." And I dealt with that. Like, he was very hard and strict. And so when I had, people that I was training, like Patrick, who now is like the DP of Naked and Afraid, he's really come a long way in his career. Like I really instilled that brute, like harsh, defining like mentor ways on him because I was like, look, you have to be tough in this business, otherwise you're never going to make it. So I would make him do everything, and even like anybody who followed after him, with Harissa and Lorna and anybody else who became my assistants, like I was always very tough on them. If they messed up, I let them know because I'm like, if you mess up, you're not only messing up my job, but you're messing up potential money for everybody. Like this, we could be totally like out of a job, and like if you don't set the camera properly and then record something and then it gets screwed up, well, guess what? I take responsibility, but then guess what? They never call us again. So it's like there's a lot of, command that has to happen and a lot of just mentoring along the way so you don't have people mess up, but you have to be very tough on them too, because, I got called upon when I was just starting out, like, only a couple of months in the business. And, like we had so much content they wanted to shoot for the show that they didn't have a camera operator. So then I had to step up and do it, and then I remember the director was holding the microphone, the boom pole, because they wanted to capture something that was happening. So I shot it, and that's how I, got my first chance. And they started calling me again to then operate, but it's like, if I wasn't ready and I was nervous, I would have never gotten that opportunity. If I said, "Oh no, I can't do it. I don't know how to shoot," but I was, I knew how to shoot and I knew what to do, and that's why I think I just started going forward fast. That was the first step and making it to a DP after that one.
Sometimes it is those little things that make such a difference to people
Oh
higher up
yeah,
than you. Naked and
yeah.
Afraid, that's a good show. I like that show.
Yeah, it's a good show. He loves it. I don't know how he does that show. Like he sent me videos and showed me pictures, and like the contestants are all full of bed bug or bug bites and
Yeah,
stuff, and
I could
they're
never
just
do that.
the conditions that he has to sleep in with like bug nets over him every night so the bugs don't crawl on him or get to him. I'm like, I'm good. You can be the outdoor guy. I'll be the indoor person. How about that?
Exactly. Richard, you've worked with some, major players in the media industry, including I read Oprah Winfrey, Gordon Ramsay, to name a few. I saw an awesome picture of you with one of my favorite singers and people of all time, Dolly Parton.
Yep.
Share with the audience, if you would, how you had the opportunity, to maybe work with some of those people, and I'm sure others that we probably know too, and how you got to meet Dolly and take that awesome picture with her.
Well, Dolly's, pretty fantastic. I mean, everyone's like, she's the nicest person in the world, and she is. I mean, she's a very likable, very giving person. And I was like, I hope it's not an act. I hope it's not an act. And it wasn't. That's her through and through. And I was doing this documentary about Linda Perry, who is a songwriter, and she was the one of the singers for the Four Non Blondes. Hey, what's going on? I
Yeah.
said, hey.
Mm-hmm.
So she writes a lot of music, and so she wrote some songs for Dolly Parton. So we flew to Nashville to interview Dolly Parton, and basically, we were not given a lot of time to set up the lighting. Like we really had to uh, work around her schedule and her team, so we only had like 19 minutes to light an interview with Dolly Parton. I'm like, this is like an icon, a legend, and I'm just like trying to work at an intense pace after like, just flying in the day before and being jet lagged. It's like, and here we are at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, it's like LA, it's 5 o'clock in LA time. So I'm like just trying to get the brain going full speed because I'm like, I have less than 20 minutes to light her and get the approval of her manager, my director. It was very intense, but everything worked out, and she just couldn't have been any nicer. And afterwards, she's like, "Do y'all want to get photos?" And of course, we had to get photos
Oh,
and
that's so
and
nice.
talk to her for a minute, because she doesn't have a lot of time. Because what people don't know is like Dolly, she's a little bit older, so she doesn't really do a lot of like interviews that often. So when she does do an interview, it's like she just takes an entire day and does like a whole day of junkets, interviews, phone calls, infomercials, does them all in one day, and that's it. That's it. It's over for the month. And we had the luxury of filming her for the documentary, and I've got to work with Gordon Ramsay, a few times. I think 3 times now. I did the F Word. It was like a live, cooking show on
Yeah.
Fox years ago, and then I did this kind of like this hybrid live events, kind of like branded content thing with him for his new kitchenware called Hexclad. And we went to his house and we filmed it, and he couldn't have been any nicer. I mean, he is a character of himself. Obviously, people love to see him yell at people on TV because people just love that. English guy yelling at somebody, they love that. They can't get enough of it.
Sure.
But like the whole time we're there, he is just like giving every person a hard time. He's making fun of his own like manager. He's just like teasing everybody because he likes to joke around constantly. Like we're about to shoot this live event, and he kept begging to go to the bathroom, like, no, we're gonna go live in 30 seconds. He goes, please, can I go pee? And he just tried to like leave, and he's a very funny guy. And like I've got to work with some pretty amazing people along my career, Jessica Alba, Paris Hilton, the Prince, Harry, and like I think of out of like the 1,000 people that I have worked with, there's probably been less than a handful of people that have been not very kind. That's pretty good numbers, to say the least. But I really have been very fortunate to work with some of the best, most talented people on the planet.
Sounds like Gordon Ramsay takes what he does seriously, but he doesn't take himself seriously.
Yes, that's it. And that's what you have to do. That's kind of how I treat, each day on set. Like, I'm very serious. We will work it out, figure out a plan, we'll make the day happen. But once we get into the groove and things are going well, it's like, then you can joke around a little bit, but not get carried away. You still got to stay the course, but you got to have fun. If you don't have fun at all while you're working, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. Can you share like a particularly memorable, or funny behind the scenes moment or two from doing reality TV or one of your commercials or film projects that really stick out?
Oh, let's see. So, one of my favorite moments ever, I'll tell you, was on Cops. Which is odd to have a funny moment on Cops, 'cause there's a lot of like trauma and bad things happen. People die on the show. There's a lot of horrible stuff that happens. But I remember one time when I was working in Vegas, 2008. I worked with this cop who liked to have fun like I did, like to joke around. And I won't say the name of this person, and I won't say they're a man or woman, but so we pulled this guy over, and it's like probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the summertime, and he is obviously drunk. Like he's like completely hammered, but somehow, he makes complete sense of what he's saying. We do all sobriety tests on him, we film him. He does everything properly, passes all the drunk tests. I don't know how he passed. And then he tells the cop, he's like, I had like 17 beers today. And they're like, what? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, well, you passed all the tests. What should I do? And he goes, I'm drunk. And then they're like, okay, you're going to get arrested. And he goes, really? No, don't arrest me, please. And then they're like, well, how about this? We're not going to arrest you, but we're going to impound your car, and we'll let you go home if I can take that beer in the car and dump it over your head. And he's like, what? And they're like, if you let us take that beer and dump it on your head, we'll let you go home for the day, and your car's being taken, but you don't go to jail for the day. He's like, absolutely. And then they took the can of beer, poured it on their head, and then we drove off. So
That is
that was
hilarious. Oh my gosh.
obviously that's that stuff. I don't say people's names, but like
No,
that's the
yeah.
kind of fun. That's the kind of fun that we had, and sometimes you got to have fun like that, And that guy, if he got arrested, he would have probably, been jammed up for a while because he had a family and kids
Oh
and stuff,
gosh, yeah.
But
And a lot of
we,
money.
that yeah, a lot of money, and that's just, some of the cops like to have fun too because they deal with some pretty horrible stuff out there, and that was just their way of having a good time.
That is a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
What role do you believe technology and AI now, plays and will play in shaping the future of filmmaking, and has it impacted, your own approach to directing?
Well, it hasn't really impacted me yet. I know it's still kind of this new phase process. I think one way it could really help. I think it could help. Uh, the movies in a certain way, as far as like, I think we've kind of like I personally think like this whole de-aging thing of actors really doesn't work. I think they need to just say, you know what, this doesn't work, just stop, because it makes the audience feel unconnected to what's happening. Like I watched the last Indiana Jones movie last year, and sure they did a great job of de-aging Harrison Ford, but the minute he starts talking, it looks so robotic and weird. It doesn't look right.
I didn't know they did that. I haven't seen the movie yet.
Yeah, they did this whole sequence at the beginning of the last movie where he's like 30 years old, and I'm like, it works until he talks, and then it just doesn't sync up properly. I think they need to let that stuff go and maybe start using AI to help do stuff in special effects when you have like all this makeup that doesn't work properly and you have to fix it, or you have green screen and it's all over their face and they can clean it up easier. There's things they can do for blemishes, but like I don't think it's I don't think it needs to start doing what Disney wanted to do. Like Disney
Yeah.
started doing stuff in movies last year where they would just kind of like pop in extras in the background, and then it's like, oh, they're next to real people, and it looked like the episode of the Sims video game. And they were doing that, and it's like I think that has to be regulated because you're taking away someone's paycheck. If
Isn't
you
that
want to
what
like
led to
show.
some of the strike and everything
Yeah,
like
that
that?
really was part of the reason the strike happened because Disney started doing that. It's like, look, I think it's okay if you're gonna like do a football stadium and like kind of generate blurred people in the background so you can make it look like it's full.
Sure.
But the minute you start seeing detailed faces and then it's an AI person, it's not even real, I think you're just taking away money out of somebody's pocket who could have been on set that day. And it's like that has to be regulated pretty hard. And I don't think they've really gotten that final yet, but that's something that needs to be, worked out.
Absolutely. Quote, I learned that the studios never come knocking at your door to ask you to direct a big budget movie. Last year, I decided to take a gamble and spend part of my savings on producing and directing my second feature length film called Roswell Delirium. It's a 1980s throwback psychological thriller with an all star 80s cast featuring Anthony Michael Hall, Lisa Whelchel, Reginald Vell Johnson, Sam Jones, and Dee Wallace, who you just mentioned a few minutes ago
Yeah.
from ET. Unquote. You took a big chance and you decided to go for it here with Roswell Delirium. You bet on yourself. What was it
Yeah.
like for you when you completed the entire film and all the editing was done and you watched it for the entirety the first time?
Wow. It was I tell you, like I had so many emotions that day because I'm like, I remember when we started getting actors, assigned like Dee Wallace and Anthony Michael Hall and Lisa. I felt like we were, really taking steps towards the next step of my career. Like I felt like this is like how I'm gonna level up. And I had watched all the footage so many times because I edited the film as well. Not that I wanted to, but I had two people that I hired who just weren't delivering what I wanted them to deliver, and they weren't finding the moments that I knew were in the film and that we captured. So I'd seen everything, but I'd never seen it like pieced together because when I edit a movie, I edit scene by scene. So like I'll watch it and I'm like, if it can't stand on its own without another scene attached, then I know it's not working. So I would just work on something till it felt like it worked by itself. And to see it all together finally, it was just like shocking. Like I was just shocked by what we did with very little money. We had my other producer Glenn got Troy Van Leeuwen from the Queens of the Stone Age to do the music for it. We worked that out. He did a beautiful job on the score, and to see all the sound design and the visual effects, and then Troy's music come together, like I felt like, wow, this is a pretty strong movie. Like this is people say you probably spent $10 million on this thing. They look at it and they watch it and it's a compliment. And sometimes they say, oh, it's low budget, and they say that too, but I'm like, we did this low budget for sure. That's an obvious fact. But like to do that in the way that we did, I feel like we accomplished something pretty major because studios who have multi-million dollar budgets don't even have a quality film like this, where the thing, we're shopping the film now to streamers and stuff, and the thing that I hear from them all the time is, most independent films don't look like your film. That it's
Right.
everything's very shaky, it's out of focus, it's handheld. But I took another gamble and I spent more money and I called on favors of friends of mine in the business to come in with a jib, and do these great crane shots. And I had a friend Merlin do Steadicam a few days, and we had a dolly like I think 10 days on the movie because I'm like it has to look a certain way because if I'm going to spend the money, we're gonna do it right, and I'm gonna spend a little bit more money than I wanted, but like it is just kind of like a calling card for me. And I was very proud of the movie, and I didn't get to see it in the theater when we had the premiere because we were like oversold by 40 seats, so I had
Positive
to help.
problem.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a good problem to have. We had like one of the number three person from Skydance there who does, that Tom Cruise's company, and they
Hmm.
came, and some other important people. And I had to kind of go and get people refunded and offer to buy their tickets for the next show, and apologize to them. And when everybody walked out of the movie afterwards, and I didn't see but only part of it in the hallway of the theater, like everybody came out and was so excited. They were all so proud of it. Like the
Awesome.
energy was so high, and that made me feel the best I've ever felt in my life. Like, wow, I did something with very little money, help of my friends and other people, and we created this movie, and all the actors and the crew were just so amazed by what we did with very little money, and they were so proud of their work, and that made me the happiest because I'm like, you're proud, and they're still talking about it 3 months later because they're so proud to be a part of that movie.
I can't wait to see it. I mean, I watched the trailer for it, and obviously doing the research on it, I was like, I can't wait to see this movie. And I don't say that about a lot of movies these days, because movies, just like you said, they're not different. I'm an 80s kid, and the
Yep.
movie, I always say the movies in the 80s, which, Anthony Michael Hall, Weird Science, Breakfast
Yep.
Club, Reginald Vell Johnson, the Die Hard movies. I mean, I still remember the first scene he was in Die Hard, when he was in the getting all those Twinkies.
Yep.
And he says, "Oh, these are from my wife." And the guy goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." And but
Sure.
I mean, just to fun family matters, and so I mean, and in D and ET and Sam and Flash Gordon and
Yep.
Lisa Welch, obviously in The Facts of Life. I mean, all those things are what I grew up to. So I was like, man, I can't wait to see it, just from reading about it, and then all those actors that I know. So this guy, I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, and even some of the cast hasn't seen it yet. Like Lisa has not seen the film yet either, so she's waiting to see it. We're gonna have a private screen next month for her and her family to come see it. But like Michael's seen it, and Dee has seen it, and Sam, and they're all, they just love it, and it's like it was a big undertaking to get like all these 80s icons to be in a movie together, and it's
Yeah.
like really hard and difficult. And I tell people, like, how did you get all these great actors in the movie? And I said, I lied. Like, what do you mean? I said, well, Hollywood is made up of lies. It's smoke and mirrors. So when I was getting people attached to the movie, I would say that I had other people attached to the project, that I didn't have attached. And that helped me get people to sign on to the film. And then after we got Sam and Dee, I didn't have to lie anymore because like
Yeah.
why I had credible actors, but getting those first two was hard because they didn't want to do it. They didn't. Oh, who's in this movie? So I had to really just kind of like pretend a little bit until they said, okay, we'll do it.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. That's the Hollywood way, unfortunately.
Yeah. What was your inspiration behind the storyline of the movie?
Well, it was kind of twofold. The first part of it was I did a documentary about kids with cancer doing their bucket list. And one kid that, we had in the film had cancer 9 times. His name was Justin.
Oh my God.
And the ninth time he got cancer, he was with his mom and he collapsed in the snow. And they took him to the hospital. They life flighted him out of there. And his mom said to him, if you want to go, you can go. And I was like, wow, so powerful for a mother to tell her son, I don't, I love you, but it's okay that if you're going to leave me. I'm giving you the okay, it's okay to go. And I thought it was so powerful of her to say that, knowing that it's not what she wanted, but it's what ultimately happened. And I thought, well, that's just a hell of a concept for a mother to just love her child that much and to say that. And what if there's a place where she could take her child that could save him, like maybe give him to aliens? Like that was just a crazy idea I had. And then all of a sudden I started writing the script. And then I think, when you write a script, you really dive into the rabbit hole of your own life and things that you live through. And the film is a lot of nostalgia. It's a lot of fun facts, Easter eggs, but it's also there's a lot of heart pain, like heart wrenching pain in the movie. There's a lot of heartache to it. It's like a roller coaster towards the second half. And I took a lot of my own experiences by the people that I have known in my life. And I had this, girlfriend years ago who was bipolar schizophrenic, and I didn't know what that term really meant back then. This is like when I was like 25, and I remember, there it became a very intense relationship, because her highs were so high, the lows are very low.
Sure.
And I just remember one day getting a call from her sister saying that she had been put in a psych ward. So that kind of changed everything for me to have to go and see someone in this facility like that every day who's, just out of their mind. And, I took a lot of my own personal trauma and experiences and kind of meshed that together with the love of the 80s and then the story of Justin, and that's really how it all kind of came together.
You talked about how you got the cast, by quote unquote lying to get some of those people, the big name people together. What was it like to work with them and collaborate with them?
Well, like everybody was a different collaboration. Like they were all great, like, the kids are all great. I love the kids to death. They're so talented and they're all like doing big things now. And um like, obviously Lisa was first. We shot with her for day one, day two. And, she just was a true professional. And, like didn't like a lot of actors, they want to like rewrite the script. They want to like get in there and talk about it. I never really had that with these actors. They were great. And the only thing she ever requested was that I give her a better opening line than what I had in the script. And I said, okay, I'll work on that, and I'll make you I'll write a better opening line for you. So when you turn around and come on camera, it just really shows who you are as a teacher and as Mrs. Peltzer in the movie. It just shows more credibility and like that was it was a good lesson for me. Okay, well, I need to make sure I really help people feel comfortable along the way. And
Sure.
Sam was funny because he and I talked about the script for like an hour and a half on our first phone call, and he had a lot of like ideas, and he really put some things in my head about some of the characters and events that I later went and I rewrote some of the scenes because he made sense. He's like he was invested, and he only had like two scenes of the movie, but he really was invested. And I was like, wow, you really care about what you're doing. I'm sure he's that way with every movie he does. And I listened to him and I changed some of the stuff with Mayday and her father in the movie because of him. And he's so giving on set, and like he loves to be on set every day. You can tell because he just talks to every person on the crew nonstop. And I'm like, Sam, we got to shoot this now. And they okay, 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 okay. But
That's
he just
cool.
wants to talk to everybody because he cares that much. And Reggie, I wrote his character as kind of like this mean CIA type FBI and guy that's coming in because Kylie kind of breaks into one of the ham radio stations and talks to some of the people at the Air Force base. And he kind of comes in there to interrogate her, and the character was written very mean and very like almost like German Nazi like, very as a matter of fact. But he is such a like a likable person that I had to rewrite that character for him because when he smiles, it's like you like him, but he knows
Yeah.
as an audience member that he is somebody who can just make you disappear in 5 seconds,
Yeah.
when he laughs. So I wrote that for him a little differently than I originally wrote it. And he was like, we shot that scene like in 5 hours, and like those two together, Kylie and Reggie, was just amazing to watch. They didn't have a rehearsal day together. They rehearsed like twice, and then we shot it, and it was magic. It was like boom, they got it, they clicked, and it's some of people's favorite scenes in the whole movie. And uh, you know, one of my favorite days on set was working with Dee, and I saw E.T. at the theater again before I filmed with her. They re-released it, and she does so much here in her face, like when she's not talking, she's like giving you something to work with all the time. Like that nonverbal acting is so important, and she does that nonstop. And I remember telling her in the restaurant that we were filming at, I said, look, we're going to move the camera closer to get your close up. And she goes, I don't fucking care where the camera's at, just film it. And then I realized she doesn't care about being here or being in a wide shot,
Sure.
because even at her age, she's given the same performance over and over again. She is there for her other actors. We're filming her husband and we're filming Ari, the waitress. like she is giving 1,000% of herself into that role. Like she is like still crying off camera. Like she is that invested. And I don't know many actors, young or old, who do that, and to do that at her age is incredible. And I remember at the end of the day, after we had another emotional scene, like she barely collapsed to my arms, and it was like, wow, I just really worked with a legendary actress. And then she had nothing but like compliments to say about, the day and me, and it felt really good to hear, and and Michael was great. Him and Ashton had, I think, 3.5 scenes together, and they just had like this best chemistry of all. And like I remember, there's Easter eggs all through the movie, that it feels like real dialogue, and it's kind of like just stuck in there, so you don't even think about it. It's kind of just disappears. And I wrote this moment in the first time that Ashton, as the older version of Firefly, and Michael have their scene, and he talks about her kind of like just not really wanting to accept what happened to her as a child with the aliens. And she goes, "Look, well, I survived 2 nuclear attacks and Wally World. Who can say that?" And I wrote that not knowing that Michael was ever going to be cast in the movie, but that's a reference to
That's
National Lampoon's
funny.
Vacation.
Yeah.
And he never flinched. Like we did that like scene, probably like 6, 7 times, and he never flinched about that, her that reference. And I'm like, later on, I was like, Michael, I'm like, would you please acknowledge that? And he's like,
Yeah.
why, I heard it, but I just let it go. And I'm like, well, I know, but I thought it was pretty funny. So,
That is a good actor letting it go, but he had them
yeah.
inside been like chuckling.
Oh yeah, because I mean, he read the script many times before we filmed it, but even
Sure.
like when him and her read the scene together one day, he still never flinched. He just like it was
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah, but it was kind of funny of all the references to make is one that actually was from a movie that he was in, and then he had to read it, or she had
Hard to
to read
believe
it
that
out
movie
loud.
is
Yeah,
83. ET was 82. So
yep,
D has to be, I guess, in her 70s.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. God.
And she works harder than anybody I know. I mean, she just goes 100% nonstop.
That's great. The star of the film is, you mentioned the young and talented Kylie Levian, who plays Mayday. You followed through on the promise you made to her that you would make a feature film that starred her one day. And there's
Yep.
also another young award-winning actress in film, Kaden Tokarski, who has the role of Becky. Tell us a little bit about them, and what you see and expect their future in this industry.
Well, I mean, so Kylie was in a short film I did 5 years ago called The Rabbit Hole.
Yeah.
And, she was probably 8 years old, very tiny, so bubbly, so fun, full of energy. And just, she came in the casting room talking about her boots, and Valentine's boots, and just very, very lovable. And I was like, wow, if I can get audiences to feel terror for this child, they're gonna love her, and it's gonna be hard when they see something bad happen to her. And I tell the story all the time, but like she messed up during the audition, and I was like, okay, whatever, I'll let it go, because it's she's a child, she's 8 years old,
Sure.
and I let it go. And there's a moment where she goes, "Can I start over again?" And I'm like, "Sure, you can do that." And then she like took a moment and goes,
Wow.
and then just delivered. And I'm like, I don't know any adult who would ever do that. And
No.
to be 8 years old and be like, and to dial it back and control it. And I was like, I was so impressed. And then I had her read a couple lines, from the film, and I was like, okay, thank you, goodbye. And I knew that was it. I knew that I knew there was something great inside of her. She didn't have the experience, but I saw the potential. And that's why I told her, I said, I'm going to write this movie for you. I'm going to put you in it. We're going to make it happen. Even with all the obstacles of the film not coming together at times, like I wanted to quit like at least once a week. It was so frustrating, with people
Sure.
saying no, money stuff. I mean, it's just a lot of the juggle when you're trying to do on this, like to try to do a big studio look on a low budget scale is hard. And I kept my promise, but it was hard. And I think she's won 4 awards now for her role as Mayday in the movie. And I told her, I was like, I said, there's not many child actors out there who carry a film. Like it is something that's kind of gone to the wayside. They have 18-year-olds playing a child, like a teenager nowadays, And I said, there's only two movies that I can remember where a child really carried the film. Well, but three probably, E.T. with Henry Thomas, and then My Girl Anna Klumsky, and then Macaulay Culkin Home
I knew
Alone.
you were going to say that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah, but like you don't have a kid letting the world like be seen through their eyes anymore. You really don't, because
Yeah.
people don't think a child can do that. But I asked a lot of her. We had her up 20 feet in the air on these high wires for the alien scene. I put her in a bald cap. I put her in these very emotional scenes, with her mother and father. And I put her through a lot of stuff, and she never complained. I mean, she is just she's a star in the making, and I can't wait for the world to see her deliver that role, because I mean, she's so good. And the thing about her is, she could hang in there with every actor that came on set. Reggie, she didn't flinch. She didn't even know who he was. Her mom knew
Right.
who he was, but
Yeah.
she didn't know, and she went toe to toe with him. She went toe to toe with Lisa, never flinched. I mean, she was so polished the whole movie. And I'm like, that's a star. When somebody can like not get nervous and be in those shoes, and you're with someone who has been around for 40 years. I mean, she went toe to toe and did a phenomenal job. And like people are really going to be amazed by her. And I mean, I'm very happy with what she did in that movie. It's powerful. And Kaden, it's funny that she came into casting. We did our first audition in 2022, and we were the only production that did in-person auditions. Like nobody was doing those at all. And I caught a lot of hell for it, because people were still like, there's a pandemic happening, you can't do that. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm moving forward. I'm going to make this movie. And I've never casted anybody off a computer screen before. I said, I have to see them in the room. I'm going to do it this way. And the funny part was, Caden, she is taught by an actress who was in my first movie ever, Michelle. And Michelle never even told me that she was coming in, but I reached out to Caden's, management, and she came in. And like Caden just killed it as the mean girl Becky. Like she was so good at it. And I said to her, well, if you want to do it again, what would you do differently? And she just made a couple adjustments. And I'm like, it was perfect. I mean, it was so good. And Caden was, I think, 13 when she came in the room. And she goes to me, she goes, well, I heard you're incredible to work with. I'll see you in my trailer. Goodbye. And walks out of the room. And I'm like, a teenager to have that much confidence
I love that.
was insane to me. And like we all looked at each other like, wow, this kid's gonna be a star. And then she did that year she was young Julia Roberts in Gaslit,
Yeah.
and the girl's won like I think 25 awards already. Like, and she's only been acting for 2 years. I mean, she's phenomenal. And I remember there's a scene where I have her like Kylie, Caden, and Georgia, who plays the best friend of Caden, and it's at a bus stop, and it's basically like the world kind of almost ended, and then it's like 2 years later and things go back to normal, which they always do after an attack, I guess.
Sure.
And I wanted it to feel like, here's all these horrible things that happen, but yet people are still being bullies, and they're still being mean to kids, like what would happen I would expect. And so Caden and Georgia are mean to Kylie's character, and the scene was so good, like the three of them together were so good that I almost cut out another scene with them later because of the budget. I was like, well, we're gonna have to let it go. But I decided to rewrite the scene and then make it where Caden's character really makes some serious digs at Kylie's character. And I showed Caden the script, and I said, remember that scene that we were not going to do? I said, I think we're going to do it again after all. And she read it, and her mouth dropped, and she's like, I can't wait to work on this. And she like spent like days breaking down the scene, and all her notes were just so detailed. And
At that age.
at that age, and like there's other actors I know that follow her, because she'll post some of her breakdowns, and she's 14 now. And I'm like, you have these older actors who are like stalking your page just to see how you're breaking down a script. I'm like, she is so talented. And I mean, the fact that we have her and Georgia and like Roman and other kids in the movie is phenomenal. I mean, they're just so good. And the kids really sometimes upstage the adults. And it's like Caden is phenomenal. And I told her, I said, I'm like, after this movie, I said, I think about 5 more years to get your first Oscar, like, because you're on your way. Like, she keeps winning awards nonstop.
And speaking of awards, I believe that your movie has now won like 35 awards, some of them best sci-fi film. You've won an award for best director feature film, best editing feature film. And you and your team at Lightforce Pictures obviously did an amazing job with this movie. How do
Thank
you
you.
think this film, and I haven't even seen it yet, and I'm just like I said, I know it from everything I've read. How do you think this film stands out from other, sci-fi movies of the genre?
Well, I think, like, I had an interview today with Lisa. We talked about sci-fi and how it really doesn't really, it's more like sci-fi is kind of like a cheesy genre. It kind of like falls into that horror genre because it's not really ever done well. And I feel like this is a film that could be a cult classic. I feel like it can stick around for years and years because it is all about the human elements. It's a story of a mother and daughter, and it really makes you care about all the characters. And when you watch most sci-fi movies, it's like, oh, there's an invasion, there's an attack, but you never know anything about the characters. It's very one-dimensional. And here, you really spend more time with the characters, get to know them, get to see their growth, see them experience all this pain and suffering, and see them change. And I think ours really will stand out because when you watch it, it feels like you're watching an 80s movie. Like the first
I
act, it
can't
feels like
wait.
it feels like the nostalgia is so deep. Like it's not like in your face, but like either the third shot of the movie, there's a ham radio and it says on the ham radio 8675309. And it's just in there like for you to kind of notice it, but doesn't
Sure.
it's not like trying to put it down your throat. And like that nostalgia factor is going to make people really happy and feel good inside, that warm apple pie sensation of the 80s, that people always think about. And then, it gets to be like character development where like things happen to these characters, and there's a lot of real life 80s events in this film. We went and went through a grueling process with NASA to get permission to use the Challenger footage. And
Oh
we
yeah.
we have a classroom scene with they watch the Challenger in the classroom, and there's a lot of real events that are talked about, things that happen to kind of make it feel real. And I think people are really going to identify and just fall in love with the story and the characters because the third act it goes in a whole different direction that people aren't ready for. Like you think, oh, there's some humor to it and it's fun, but really it becomes very emotional.
And in today's world, talking about not to get anything political or anything, because I don't talk politics, a nuclear war is probably more possible today than ever before in our lifetime. Maybe, it's scary just thinking about something like that happening.
Oh yeah, because in the first classroom scene, like the attack has already happened. It's 2 years later, and Lisa's character, she's a teacher, and she talks about the Able Archer 83 drill, and it was a drill back in the 1980s where they basically pretended to do a whole evacuation of the president, and they had him like airlifted out. They took him out of there, and it almost caused the Cold War to happen because the Russians thought that the U.S. is pulling the president out of the White House because they were going to attack the USSR. So it
Oh,
almost really set off this whole nuclear attack back in the 80s just by this precautionary drill they were trying.
like the
So
movie War Games,
yeah,
same
exactly.
year,
Yeah. 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 So
different
there's
different
really a lot of
story,
that
but
in this film. Yeah. And I think it's important too, because even like when you do watch the film and they're talking about the attacks that are starting to happen right before that in the scene, Mayday's going to bed saying goodnight to her grandfather. And then on the news, they start talking about nuclear attacks, and the potential of nuclear attacks. So there's always things happening and you got to pay attention to in the film. But like, it's really like, I mean, a nuclear attack could happen at any time, really. So it's like
I know.
people should live their best day because you don't know when that day might just come to an end.
Right. You mentioned just a little while ago, you were talking about walking around Chicago with your Walkman. I was like, there's going to be people that are going to watch this or listen to this and be like, what the heck is a Walkman?
Oh yeah,
I used to remember mine. And, yeah, that was cool.
well, we originally wanted to do like the CD player Walkman. We have it in the movie. We were gonna have this whole little moment in the movie because I had the CD Walkman, and no matter where I was, it never played correctly. Like if you were walking with it, it would skip. It would just skip. It wouldn't play the CD all the way through. So I was going to have this funny moment with Kylie walking, and it had her trying to stop so it could play the music through. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
it might become a too much comical thing. But we just had her with a Walkman, listen to Def Leppard, and that was what we had her listening to.
I love Def Leppard. I've seen them in concert a couple of times. So yeah,
Me
great.
too.
What do you
Yeah,
hope?
they
Yeah, they rock. They still, I mean, yeah,
they still do it.
yeah, they still do it. What do you hope audiences will take away from watching this movie?
Well, I always say if they don't leave the theater talking about it, they didn't love the movie. And for me, I want them to just really like the film as a metaphor for mental illness. Like that's what the whole film is really about. When you watch it and you get to the end, you'll see that there's all these messages along the way. There's hidden things that happen along the way, and in the end, really delivers this message to the audience about aliens and mental illness and stuff. And I really want people to kind of open the narrative because I think like these days, like it's a movie, it's entertaining, and there's great score and special effects and great actors, but it's a message movie. It's like I want people to open the dialogue to talk about mental health because I think as a nation, like that's the thing we suffer from the most. I mean, like nowadays,
Absolutely.
like social media has destroyed children's confidence. Like it is a toxic world. Like I wish that they would do something to take down all like these social media platforms and like even okay, let's say you allow them to continue, take away the comments. Don't allow people to comment anymore because I think if you take away stuff like that, you will keep children to be a little more mentally sane because people just really get
Brutal.
depressed so easy. Yeah, it's very brutal. People make some horrible comments. Even like Kaden, who plays the mean girl, one time we had dinner, me, her, and her mom, and we were talking, and she's like, she did this show called Darman where she plays a bully as well. And like the comments that she got from people were so just like, this is a child and they're saying all these horrible things about her. Adults are saying these horrible things. And I'm like, and I just said to her, I said, look, I said, I would just ignore them. I said, if you can ignore these things, because people would never say that to your face. Like
Right.
people
They
love
hide
to sit
behind a
behind,
computer.
they hide behind the computer because it's safe. They know they'll never have to confront you. But, it's like people don't realize like, when people are like shaping their brain and they're like becoming who they are and they're just crafting themselves, those words can impact them for a lifetime, because
Young
they
teenage
don't,
girls, especially.
yeah, teenage girls especially because, like I always say, physical abuse, it heals, but like that mental abuse, that stays forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait to see it, just to see that there. I know I've, struggled with depression since being a kid, on and off, and had a few instances. I've talked about this openly on the podcast of, getting close to where I felt like I wanted to end my life.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I made the decision that that was not, the right thing to do for, obviously, for myself, for people that love me, that would be here, and me be gone. And it's sort of a selfish thing, but I mean, I can't imagine having, social media back in the 80s and 90s and some of the stuff I was going through, and the depression and things like that, and having to deal with just that's why I'm not on Twitter or X or whatever it is, because
Yeah.
talk about brutal. That is just like, I stay off of that because I look at some of the
Yep.
comments sometimes. I'm like, I got on there, set up an account. I was on there for 3 days and I deactivated.
Yeah. It's a shame because like I remember, 10 years ago, Facebook was fun. It was a fun place to go. And now that's all changed. It's not the same anymore. And for me, if I post anything on social media, it's all like, here's something fun I did,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I don't use it as a political platform. I don't use it to like talk bad about people or to people. It's like I just want like I wish it was fun again, but people have kind of made it not a fun place to be. It's very toxic, unfortunately.
You are correct. Richard, do you have any upcoming projects or collaborations that you have that you're pretty excited about? Anything coming up soon?
Well, I just worked on a documentary for on MSNBC called "Serving in Secret" about gays in the military that aired on MSNBC the other month. I have a James Brown documentary I worked on coming out this month on A&E. And then that Linda Perry documentary I did for the last 2 years. It's going to premiere in Tribeca Film Festival in June.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then I have two campaigns I'm doing for Subaru right now. We're preparing and doing those next month in Kansas City and Austin. So there's things constantly that I'm working on. So,
What are the most important lessons that you've learned in life?
well, I have learned, like I said before, to never give up because, like myself, and as you were speaking of earlier about depression, it's like, I have battled that my entire life. I found a photo the other week where there's a picture of me and I'm sitting there with my two little cousins and I had like bloody knuckles from punching the wall. Because I was a very angry kid, went through a lot of stuff as a child, uh, mental, physical abuse, and like depression, is something like really can like make you not want to live anymore, and I used to fantasize about my own funeral back in the day, and it's like I never got help like when I was a younger, and later I did when I got older. I learned how to deal with stuff. But I think it's easy to quit. I think people really find it easy to quit. It's harder to keep moving forward. And I think for me, I've learned to not quit in every aspect of my life. I even in relationships, friendships, you try to hang in there as long as you can until like you realize, okay, maybe things aren't working for me. Like I'm giving more than I'm getting. This is a very bad friendship. I had to let it go, but I try to stay in there as long as I can about anything and not quit. And that's like my life lesson that I could probably give anybody. It's like just never quit.
Yeah, you have to sometimes eliminate toxic people and
Yeah.
situations, even if you don't want to, just for your own self and well being.
Yeah, it's very important because, in this business, sadly, people are always wanting to use you. They want something from you.
Yep.
You have to like figure out yourself, use your secret decoder ring to figure out who is going to be a good friend or not. And luckily, I have found some pretty incredible people to be my friends who helped on the movie. And the sad part was I moved here in 2004 and all those people are gone. Like we're not friends anymore because they were just not good people. And
Yeah.
it's like you really have to surround yourself with quality people and learn when it's time to say goodbye to somebody. It's like, well, you don't really care about me. You want to use me for something for your benefits.
Yep. I've learned that too.
Yep.
How can people find you and Lightforce Pictures on social media? And also, how can they, watch Roswell Delirium?
You can go to lightforcepictures.com to follow me, or go to Instagram or Facebook at Rick Bakewell to follow me as well. And right now, to see Roswell, we're doing film festivals currently as we're working out the contracts of the streamers that we're, offers that we're getting. It's a long process, like it's
Sure.
like a 6 month process. Sadly, it doesn't just happen overnight. So we were showing at the TLC Chinese Theater 6 in 2 weeks. February 24th, and then we're going to be in Chicago, and then the Phoenix Film Festival in April, and then Barcelona in September. So I think, probably by June we'll have a home for Roswell. But right now, if you go to lightforcepictures.com and the Roswell page, you can see all the information about where to watch it, where it can be seen, and all the updates.
Awesome. Once again, I wanted to thank the sponsors of Think Big with Michael Zellner, Buckley's Grill, and owners Ken Dick and Jeff Fiorinelli. And they're located at 5355 Poplar Avenue, right at the corner of Estate and Poplar. And also thank Kelly Potter, co-owner of Roof and Nail, located in Olive Branch, Mississippi. But they do both, like I said, big and small work all over the Mid-South. Richard, you're definitely, I would say, the epitome of someone who thinks big, and doing my research on your life and career, one thing that constantly went through my mind is, how much perseverance and desire that you have to succeed despite all the obstacles that started, back in school. And then obviously now I know even further back, in your
Yep.
childhood, and you're still making things happen. And I expect that, both you and Lightforce Pictures, with the staff that you have, will continue to grow and become even more successful. And I'd love to have you back sometime, in the next few years to, share with my audience, what great things you have going on then too.
I absolutely love that.
Well, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time and your busy schedule to come on the podcast today. So thank you so very much.
Yep. Thanks for having me. It's been
My,
great.
my pleasure. Thank you.